It's really strange when you wake up on a Monday and you find out on ESPN.com there's a story about Stadium Events. A featured story about Stadium Events. ESPN.com doing a story about the game I love the most to talk about, Stadium Events, which, as you know, was rebranded. It was first Stadium Events. Nintendo bought it, changed it into World Class Track Meet. It was released as the only other game for the Family Fun Fitness Pad by Bandai. The packing game at the time was Athletic World, which eventually still was released from Bandai. But Nintendo's like, you know what? We want to take Stadium Events off the market. We want to do that. We want to take that game off the market. We want to rebrand it. Change the title screen. World Class Track Meet. Take your Family Fun Fitness Pad and its weird colors off the market. And we'll put them together as a Power Pad. World Class Track Meet combo. And come out with their power set. And that's what they did. So this is by Justin Heckert. And the story this is the byline. How did a boring Nintendo game from 1987 become the most coveted cartridge ever? It's a bit of a mystery. Well, a little bit of a hyperbole. It's not the most coveted cartridge ever. That would still probably be Nintendo World Championships, if you want to be honest. But you know, he's trying to lure people in. And this article goes through about 4 or 5 people who have either had the game or ended up buying it. It starts out with one of the latest big discoveries, which is at a Goodwill in North Carolina. Jennifer Thompson found it. Went to the McDonald's across the street to access the Wi-Fi. She was sure she heard about the game before, wasn't sure. Ran back in and bought it for like, $8? From the $30 she had in her bank account. And she eventually sells the game to a collector who already had one, by the way. He already had one. What, a dentist? She sold it to. She got it verified at a video game store. Again, this is 3 years old. This is all Nintendo H2, my favorite website. She turned down the guy who at least verified it and sold it online. The good news is that for them, they were not doing too well at the time. Her husband was laid off. Jennifer's husband, Jeff, was laid off. And so they really needed that money they eventually got from the game. It was not a dentist that bought it. It was an orthodontist in Indiana. So he wanted this game, a second copy of it. And it was in better condition than one he had. He had one in the box already, but there was a little cut on the back of the box, and it was missing the instruction manual. So he wanted this one instead. In this story, I don't want to rag on this orthodontist too much. His name is Todd Curtis, 41 out of Indiana. He says that in this article, I never had a Honus Wagner rookie. That's what this game is to this hobby. I don't know how many Honus Wagner cards are out there compared to how many Stadium Events there are. If this game is really that rare, you can see it 20 years coming up at Christie's where people are going to pay $900,000. Todd, I will see you in 20 years in 2036 when there's no way in hell this game will even get to a third of the price of $900,000. I'd be shocked if this gets to 150 or 100 complete in box. I just don't see that happening. People forget when they talk about rare comics or baseball cards and try to think that video games will get to that same upper echelon. The pool of people that could potentially and already collect baseball and baseball cards and comic books is like 100 times, and I'm being conservative, could be 500 times the size. So one of the reasons why, like, the Honus Wagner card, you know, the famous tobacco card, which is even like the rarest card out there, it's just the one that, well, he's a Hall of Famer. They took it off the market supposedly because he didn't want to be associated with tobacco products. The reason why that shot up in price is that you had guys like Wayne Gretzky bidding on it. You had guys like Todd McFarlane that wanted that card to bid it up to that insane level. These are guys that were hugely famous, multi-millionaires, the tops in both their fields, whether it's hockey or comic book artist. So these are guys that they want to get in and create waves and want a status symbol. I'm not saying that there's not going to be a big like Hollywood actor or big musician, hell, Kanye West likes a TurboGrafx 16, that could get into video game collecting and push these game prices up to an insane amount. I just think it's very fucking unlikely for that to occur. Because retro video game collecting is still such a small niche. And I know that you guys out there, that you want to legitimize this, you want to retire on it, and then support the next 6 generations of your family. I totally get that. And hell, I wish it could happen too. If I ever want to have kids, they'll be set for life, and then their kids' kids. I just don't see it happening. I'm keeping it real right now. And this is as someone that, again, owns some very high-priced video game items. So it's not like I'm a fucking hater or I'm fucking jealous of you, because I own games that are very expensive too, that are worth 5 figures. And I'm still saying I don't see it ever happening, ever, where you're going to compare the most valuable video game to the most valuable baseball card or comic book. I don't think it'll ever get to that point. At least in our lifetimes. If you want to come back and pull me in my frozen head 150 years from now, maybe I'll be eating crow then and say, all right, you know, the game's worth $800,000. But then again, that's probably because of the awful inflation in the future. When we're all in the same credits on our phones that, you know, we all universal new world order currency. I just don't see that happening. Again, video games, at least a game like Stadium Events, will never have the cultural significance of a baseball Hall of Famer or the first appearance of frickin' Batman or Superman. Batman or Superman, a shitty Power Pad game that got re-released that's worth $3. Yeah, I don't see those lining up on the same scale of collectability. I think one outweighs the other just by a tad. So the article goes on and talks about my pal Tim Atwood out in Michigan, talking about having his 18 sealed ones and now still has a case of 6 sealed Stadium Events. You might have heard us talk about it on the podcast a bit. It was a whole series of videos where we talked about him coming out about it, and then people on Nintendo Age attacking him because not all everyone on Nintendo Age, but some of you are fucking babies and feel threatened when a bigger collector comes out of the shadows and makes you feel insignificant like a little kid. And that's basically what a lot of you guys did. Not all. You're going to say Pat hates all Nintendo Age. No, I don't hate all of you. I hate some of you on Nintendo Age. I also like some of you on Nintendo Age. And I love a few of you as well. And I'll give some of you a hug. Anyway. But he was interviewed. He's 60. It was great to see a picture of Tim Atwood smiling. Ian and I still owe him a sandwich. Just talk about, you know, when he worked at the warehouse, he saw a pallet of cardboard boxes in the corner of the warehouse. And it was 250 sealed games. 250 sealed cases of games for the NES made before 91. 250 times 6, Pat math, that's 1,500 sealed NES games. We're talking values of probably just the Stadium Events alone ones, if he got full of value for, and the collecting world didn't know about it because then the prices will go down if you knew there was 18 out there, hundreds of thousands of dollars. For 200, or excuse me, over 1,000 sealed NES games. Again, to the right buyers. So he still owns them. And then he regrets. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he posted the picture on Nintendo Age. He talks about it in the article. And then he said, in quotes, "That's when the frickin' shitstorm happened. I should have kept my big mouth shut." And one of the reasons he says that is because the amount of calls and people trying to find out where this guy's at, and not necessarily for nefarious reasons where they want to steal the games from, but they want to get these games for themselves. Either get them because they desire it for their collections, or want to snoodle him, where I just made out, snoodle him out of these games for a cheap price to flip it. Say, oh, I want this game my whole life. Here's $100 to try to sell it for 20 grand. You know, and there's assholes out here that would do it. Some of you listening, you're that fuckwad that would try to do that to my buddy Tim Atwood. Don't think that you're not that person out there. If you're listening out there, there's one or two of you out there, fuck you. Anyway, so that's what Tim wanted to try to avoid. You know, having his name out there. And so, but what's cool about this article is that the author tried to talk to people at Bandai Nintendo and figure out what the hell happened. with this game. Was there a recall? Was it pulled from shelves? Was the game destroyed? And from the article, there's still no clear answer what happened to Stadium Events. What happened? No one at Bandai knows. There's no one there that was still working there, 30 years later that answered him. But what he did go into was the president at the time, Minoru Arakawa. He thought he liked the technology and he wanted to buy it and relaunch it as a power pad. That's common sense because that's what happened. And it was rebranded, Stadium Events, as World Class Track Meet, so as not to confuse the market, according to Gail Tilden, who worked for Nintendo at the time. So we do know, like, that's the basic stuff that's even common sense you can work out without even realizing what happened behind the scenes. But we're not sure what happened to the Stadium Events that already existed at the time. We're not entirely sure. We obviously know it's bullshit that it was test marketed. That's bullshit. There's no evidence of that. All the evidence to the contrary. They only released 300 to Woolworths in New York. That's all garbage. It was nationwide. We know that. But they're not saying Nintendo and Bandai. They're not saying. Howard Phillips was asked about this, and he doesn't even know offhand. So he thinks that there were 10,000 copies of Stadium Events produced. Maybe. In quotes, Howard Phillips says, "That sounds like a crazy big number given that so few have shown up. 10,000 copies for the North American release was close to a minimum run. If there were 10,000, I don't know where they ended up. I don't have recollection of us burying them in a landfill. Destroying them or reworking them would have been a laborious task. Getting the label off would have been overly laborious on a per unit basis. So the rarity is a mystery, isn't it? The amount of money it would have cost to even have workers come into all the retail stores, gather the 10,000, drive them all back to freaking Nintendo headquarters in Seattle, in North America, get them out of the truck, and then destroy them, throw them in a landfill. Why would Nintendo care that much at that point? Remember, this is for a peripheral that is almost as rare as Stadium Events. It's not like you can walk out on eBay anytime you want to walk out, or search on eBay, or walk out to your local game shop and find a Family Fun Fitness pad. So I think what's happened here is we have a sort of minimum that Howard Phillips says was produced. I think he could be incorrect. And of course, who the hell am I to question Howard Phillips? If they were to produce 10,000 Stadium Events, it would be a fair, reasonable guess that means they produce at least 10,000 Family Fun Fitness pads, correct? Because without the fitness pads, you can't play the freaking game. But no one ever talks about there being a Family Fun Fitness pad recall. That's never brought up. No one ever says they destroyed all these Family Fun Fitness pads, or those are locked away. What, do they ship them back out overseas to the Bandai warehouse? That could be a possibility. But no one in any of these retail stores across the U.S. have ever come out and said that. We have no one at Nintendo that knows exactly what happened, and no one at Bandai has spoken about it. So my gut is that 10,000 mark is way off. And my gut's going to say they maybe made, I don't know, a few thousand of these at most. Maybe 1,000 of them. There wasn't 10,000 Family Fun Fitness pads made. I can almost guarantee you that. How many collectors out there have even that? How many collectors have a complete in-box Athletic World variant that came with the Family Fun Fitness pad? That's just as rare as the Stadium Events in-box almost. So they're about on the same level to me, the Family Fun Fitness pad and Stadium Events. Not a huge amount out there. But what's interesting, though, is that Howard Phillips kept all his records, according to the author's communication with me. And I was interviewed, which I'll get into this in a bit. I was interviewed for this article. I think it was back in like 6-7 months ago at least. Howard Phillips, he's not in the country right now, Howard Phillips. But he's pretty sure if he gets back and goes through his storage and his records, he'll be able to find the documents he thinks that could shed light on this. That could be pretty big news. He speculated that Arakawa told Bandai to take back their stock, which would have been a boat headed to the U.S. Or they made it to a U.S. warehouse and then were shipped back. He talked about Arakawa strong-arming a small company like Bandai. He seriously believed at least 10,000 of every game was made. What happened to the stock is a mystery. And then, of course, no one at Bandai knows what the hell's going on. So, let's hope that Mr. Phillips eventually returns, finds those records, and says in black and white, here's the directive from Arakawa that said, Bandai, take back the unsold, 9,900 copies of the game, whatever. The 9,000 or the 10,000 that didn't make it to the stores or didn't sell. We want you to take these games back. We're going to ship them back to you, and it's your responsibility to destroy them, or else the directive was that we want this game back and destroy them. Either way, we'll be a lot closer. The breadcrumbs will lead to one of two spots, or one of three spots. They weren't taken out of stores. They weren't recalled. They were shipped back to Nintendo, or else there was an extra shipment. Say the main shipment never even made it over to the U.S. and they turned the frickin' freighter ship around, or never took the cargo off of that ship and turned it back around, and now either Bandai destroyed it or it's in some fucking Bandai warehouse somewhere in Japan. And boy, I hope they still have like 5,000 sitting there, because there's a distinct possibility that this is where the story could lead if Howard Phillips gets back to us eventually. So I'm going to keep in touch with the author of the article, and I'm going to needle him every few months to see what Howard has to say. Hell, I'll pay Howard to get that information, to put this to bed once and for all. So here's the article about me. Pat Contry, who co-hosts one of the most popular gaming podcasts on iTunes, the Completely Unnecessary Podcast, owns every other officially licensed NES game, but says he won't buy Stadium Events on principle. He recently self-published Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the NES Library, a 437-page book that rates NES games on a 5-star system, and Stadium Events scored 1.5 stars. Meanwhile, hundreds of other games are hardly worth anything at all. Super Mario Bros., arguably the greatest NES game of all time, is worth around $11. In quotes, Pat says, you can buy an identical copy of the game, World Class Track Meet, for $3. Pat says, Stadium Events gets pushed up on a pedestal. I despise the aura around it, an aura of elitism. It draws out the worst of the hobby. I couldn't even pronounce my own quote properly without mumbling it. So, again, look at this article. I've gone on far enough. It seems like that Tim's probably going to keep that last case of 6 games. He's already opened up the other 2 cases and sold off the last 12 the past few years, which we talked about before. What's funny is that the Video Game Authority, they're the guys who grade these games. The Authority always thought there was only 5 sealed copies. Well, you add 18 from Tim, is actually 23. So they're not exactly the Authority, are they? Nope, they're not. Tim doesn't need the money, it says. He said he once given someone a $1,000 game for a single dollar just to see the look on that person's face. That's probably what we mentioned. He gave someone a Mario Brothers arcade black box NES game. He basically gave someone for nothing who loved just collecting Mario merchandise and games. So the orthodontist is happy to have a better copy. Now he can sell his extra one. Please don't hoard these games, Mr. Orthodontist. Please sell them off. There's no reason to have 2 or 3 Stadium Events games complete in box. But even they admit that the game's horrible. And it's fucking awful. And there's more. So go read the article. I show up for a bit. It's great to see Tim, the look on Tim's face, just smiling ear to ear. We're going to buy you a sandwich at some point, Mr. Atwood. We're going to buy you a sandwich.